LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the May 15th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Meeting Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. As you can see from the title of the video, my main topic is Toxic Trump Ruins Republicans. And I will have several clips of that, a lot of them emanating from the Toxic Trump town hall that CNN broadcast earlier this week, or I guess last week at this point when I'm broadcasting on Monday, but last Wednesday night, because I will be showing you several different Republicans trying to respond to the toxic things that Trump said during that CNN town hall. I'll be covering a few other things. The end of Title 42 immigration policy was covered pretty extensively. The looming debt ceiling crisis. Those aren't on the main topic, but they are kind of related. And of course, Trump being found liable for sexual abuse and defamation of E Jean Carroll. That is like a big topic that wasn't covered enough, I think, on the Sunday programs, as I'll explain when I get there. But what is like the most toxic Trump example I could think of from the last week? It wasn't from the CNN town hall, although I am going to give you a second political comedy clip. Well, the first political comedy clip that's a video clip will be from the Trump town hall with CNN. But the first thing I want to show you is it's a political comedy still image, because how toxic Trump is to me is kind of defined by how he can take what is like the most the most bland, inoffensive, like nonpartisan, non-divisive issue and make it divisive. And what could be a more bland, unoffensive issue than Mother's Day? So let's take a quick look. What did Trump post on Truth Social on Mother's Day? Happy Mother's Day to all, in particular, the mothers, wives, and lovers of the radical left fascists, Marxists, and communists who are doing everything within their power to destroy and obliterate our great country. Please make these complete lunatics and maniacs kinder, gentler, softer, and most importantly, smarter, so that we can quickly make America great again. So yeah, that is the toxic Trump take on Mother's Day. And you saw in that post there that he talked about how he wanted to make his opponents smarter, because one of the things he's always talking about is stupid people. And that was one of the things he talked about in this next clip, the video clip I'm going to show you from the Trump town hall. And I found this is like one of the greatest pieces of evidence I could show you about how Trump toxicity is ruining Republicans, my title topic here, because there's a shot of the audience here. Trump's going to make a joke about how he's flip-flopped. He's flip-flopped on his stance on the debt ceiling. And, you'll see the joke here. It's not much of a joke, but he's basically saying, I have no principles. I will just say what is in my best interest wherever I am. But the worst thing about the CNN town hall, and I watched the entire thing, and it was disgusting, and it was disgusting mainly because of the reaction of the audience. They're like laughing and encouragement, and you'll see that in this clip. This is the Trump toxicity, like, condensed down for 54 seconds, which I will talk about because it's political comedy. Trump's making a joke and he's smirking, and I actually use this in the thumbnail for the video. It's disgusting, and I will talk a little more about why it's disgusting after we watch that clip together over here.
If they don't give you massive cuts, you're going to have to do a default. And I don't believe they're going to do a default, because I think the Democrats will absolutely cave, because you don't want to have that happen. But it's better than what we're doing right now, because we're spending money like drunken sailors.
So just to be clear, Mr. President, you think the U.S. should default if the White House does not agree to the spending cuts Republicans are demanding?
You might as well do it now, because you'll do it later. Because we have to save this country. Our country is dying. Our country is being destroyed by stupid people, by very stupid people.
You once said that using the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge just could not happen. You said that when you were in the Oval Office.
That's when I was president.
So why is it different now that you're out of office?
Because now I'm not president.
Now, they cut away to the audience there, and you see people laughing and applauding. Now, it's important to note that there were some people not laughing and applauding. And sometimes when you listen to an audience on TV, you don't get the same, you only hear the people who are reacting. You don't hear the people who aren't reacting. And I did see some reporting that there may have been some people in that audience who were quiet because they were told, don't boo, you can applaud, but don't boo, or, be respectful. And to be respectful of, I don't know what he talked about stupid people, but those people who in the cutaway shot of the audience who are like laughing and clapping, they're like, he's lying to us. He has no principles. He'll say whatever it is that is in his interest in whatever positions he's in. And like a little before the clip there, if you watch the whole thing, you can see that he talked about, he was like berating the Democrats like Schumer for when he was president. They like were holding up the debt ceiling, and now they've switched positions, although that's not actually completely accurate, especially since at least the both majorities in control of Congress gave Trump no condition debt ceiling raises. And I'm going to get to that debt ceiling question again when I get to one of the Republicans being confronted with the dangerous things Trump said in that town hall. I have actually, by the way, down in the video description, you can see short summaries of all the clips I'm showing. And so you'll see I have 8, 9, 10, and 11 are the 4 Republicans trying to respond to toxic things Trump said in the CNN town hall. It's Nikki Haley, Representative Mark Green, Representative Mike McCall, and Representative Byron Donalds will all respond to different toxic things that Trump said. But I want to get to the news summaries, and I almost have them longest to shortest, but I decided to put NBC News Meet the Press in front because I think they most covered what I made the main topic of the live stream today. Basically, you'll see, there's a lot of things covered in the NBC News Meet the Press news summary from Chuck Todd. He starts off talking about like the Republican Party being paralyzed by Donald Trump, which, I don't know, it's more being paralyzed by the large swath of the Republican Party that is like in a Trump personality cult. And then they talk about Ron DeSantis and how he made this soft criticism of Trump in Iowa, but didn't actually say Trump's name. It's just like, we've got to get out of this loser mentality or this losing strategy. Republicans can't have can't be losers. And he doesn't say Trump, but all the things he talks about, they lost, they lost the House in 2018. They lost the Senate and the White House in 2020. They didn't get their red wave in 2022. So yeah, they're like pretty much every year since Trump had his fluke victory in 2016 has been a losing year for Republicans, basically because of Trump, or some people could say that, although some people also talk about the midterms being due to the whole abortion issue. But anyway, I will show you the whole, I'm like talking about the NBC News Meet the Press news summary for like longer than the news summary will take to show you. So let's watch it together, and then I'll talk about it with you a little more after that.
Good Sunday morning and a happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. What we saw this week is a Republican Party that is paralyzed by Donald Trump. Elected Republicans and Trump's 2024 rivals are eager to move on, but not sure how to take on Trump, and they're terrified of alienating his supporters. It makes them desperate to follow the voters rather than trying to lead them. And the paralysis is in the party has been key to Donald Trump's strength. In Iowa Saturday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's having to reboot his campaign before it's even gotten off the ground, he invited a political columnist to Tallahassee last week, letting reporters know he does plan to announce really soon. And yet he tiptoed around his criticism of Trump, never mentioning him by name.
We must reject the culture of losing that has infected our party in recent years. The time for excuses is over. If we get distracted, if we focus the election on the past or on other side issues, then I think the Democrats are going to beat us again.
DeSantis came to Iowa with all the presidential trappings, even had a bus wrapped with the words, "Join Team DeSantis for President." But it is an open question whether Trump supporters even accept the premise that DeSantis was arguing there, that Donald Trump has been losing. And this week, after Trump was found liable for sexual abuse, his 2024 opponents barely blinked, perhaps spooked by the Republican reaction to the Manhattan indictment. Even Mike Pence, who rose to political prominence, arguing that a president of the United States should be held to the highest moral standards, defended him.
It's just one more story focusing on my former running mate that I know is a great fascination to members of the national media, but I just don't think it's where the American people are focused.
Well, whether it's the American people or Republican primary voters, in our recent NBC News poll, a whopping 68% of Republican primary voters believe the multiple investigations into Trump are politically motivated and that Republicans need to defend him. Perhaps Pence is simply responding to those numbers, because there was just 26% who said the party needs to find a different nominee who won't be distracted. The Republican Party, which once impeached a president over an affair with an intern, no longer finds moral wrongdoings disqualifying. Trump's rivals also had very little to say when he sketched out a second-term vision, which is likely to turn off swing voters during a televised town hall this week. He called the January 6th insurrection a beautiful day, said he would pardon many of the January 6th rioters. He embraced the possibility of default. Democrats don't agree to massive cuts. He even refused to answer whether he wants Russia or Ukraine to win the war in Ukraine right now, or to even say whether Putin is committing war crimes or is a war criminal. Trump said he was so honored to be the one to terminate Roe v. Wade. And he also refused to commit to accepting the results of the 2024 election. So right now, the only person Donald Trump appears to be helping is Joe Biden, whose polling problems would be magnified without the circus that surrounds Trump. To be sure, President Biden has plenty of challenges, and this is likely the start of a very difficult summer, with both the border and debt ceiling testing him. And the best case scenario for the White House is that the uncomfortable compromises that they're likely to have to make simply do no further political damage. With Biden struggling in the polls, Democrats running in competitive Senate races, including Kyrsten Sinema, an independent who caucuses with them, are finding it easier to criticize him right now.
They made the decision to end Title 42 today. They also made a decision to not prepare for the end of Title 42.
I oppose the Biden administration plan to end Title 42 this week without a real plan in place for the strain it'll put on an already broken immigration system.
And joining me now is Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Senator Murphy, welcome back to me.
So, and I'm not going to have a clip of Senator Chris Murphy after the news summaries. I'm going to show sort of, it's almost the second half of that news summary from Chuck Todd talking about kind of my main topic, how Trump is toxic for the Republican Party. And he talked, the thing I don't like about the way he discussed it, and I'll talk about this a little more when I get to that first newsmaker clip, Russell Moore, the editor of Christianity Today, talking about how Trump has like corrupted the Christian evangelicals, which really means white Christian evangelicals, because Black Christian evangelicals have always been more liberal. And I'm even going to talk about how Christianity, I mean, I'm an agnostic atheist, so I have criticism of all religion being, based on faith and not evidence. I think things should be based on reason and evidence and, scientific method and all that. So I have criticisms of Christianity and all other religions that are based on, believing in things for which there's no evidence. But I've, over the years, worked with a lot of Christians. There are a lot of progressive Christians, but this is about evangelical Christians, and they don't really say white, and they leave out some of the other Christians, and I'll talk about that when I get to the Chuck Todd clip. But the other thing that I don't like about it, he talked about like the morality of Republicans and how they used to, care about morality, but now they don't. No, they at least used to pretend that they cared about morality. Now they don't pretend anymore. It's not like Republicans were ever all that is interested in morality. And, back when there was a moral majority, was the moral majority really like caring for people, like people suffering from AIDS and that kind of thing? They were not the most caring people, as someone who actually remembers the 1980s when they had, during the Reagan administration, and they had, well, now I'm going off on a tangent, which, I sometimes do, and I'll talk about that more when I get to, clip number 7, which may be the clip of the week, I don't know, but definitely I thought that was the best news summary. I saw, Peter Reed in the live comment saying, is Chuck Todd still a thing? I know there are like a lot of Chuck Todd haters out there, and I have a lot of criticisms for Chuck Todd. I even just criticized some of his framing, and of course his producers and NBC News Meet the Press's framing of this issue. But I don't know. Sometimes good things happen on NBC News's Meet the Press, and I'll talk about that a little more when I get to that clip. But I want to show you this next news summary. And there were some things covered there really briefly, like the end of Title 42 and Democrats breaking with Biden over this end of a COVID emergency immigration policy, which was kind of bogus to begin with. And the ACLU is suing the Biden administration. And my longtime viewers know that I have been an ACLU activist for a long time. And I think if you go back into my old videos, you'll find me at some rallying for the rights of immigrants during the Obama administration, because he was the deporter-in-chief, and I kind of opposed the immigration policies of Obama, Trump, and Biden. And so I support this latest ACLU lawsuit, which I believe is mentioned in this ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. This is the anchor, Jon Karl, and then their reporter. Sorry, let me look at my notes real quick. With the news summary, Jon Karl, and then Will Carr after Jon Karl talks about Trump divisiveness and the CNN town hall and the E Jean Carroll verdict, and then their reporter Will Carr at the border doing a extensive look at the so-called border crisis and my criticism of this, and then also the Fox News coverage and a lot of this Title 42 coverages. They don't really talk about why are all these people showing up at the border? What is going on, where they're coming from? What is the emergency down in the Northern Triangle countries? And there's a little bit of coverage of that, but not enough. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. This week we saw the clearest indication yet just how strange and difficult and deeply divisive the upcoming presidential campaign will be. After Donald Trump took the stage at CNN's town hall this week in New Hampshire, many commentators said he showed he hasn't changed, that he's the same guy who lied compulsively and inspired an insurrection as president. But that's not quite true. Trump demonstrated this week that after leaving the White House more than 2 years ago, he has become more extreme and less restrained in attacking the system that made it possible for him to be elected in the first place. He endorsed a U.S. government default. He hailed January 6th as a special day. And he said he'd likely pardon most of those who attacked the Capitol. He embraced his old policy of separating children at the border, a policy that as president, he ultimately rescinded. And he was applauded by a mostly Republican audience when he attacked a woman who this week a jury found he had sexually abused. It would be tempting to ignore a display like that, but Donald Trump is, as of this moment anyway, the clear frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination. He can't be ignored. And neither can the deeply challenging issues confronting the country, issues that demand a more serious debate and a more serious discussion than Donald Trump offered on that stage in New Hampshire. So we'll get to 2024, but we begin today at the southern border, where thousands of migrants continue to cross into the United States from Mexico amid the end of Title 42 pandemic-era immigration restrictions. We'll talk shortly with Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas after this report from ABC's Will Carr at the border in Brownsville, Texas. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, John. A lot of people were predicting chaos here at the border after Title 42 expired. So far, that hasn't happened. Authorities say they are still bracing for a surge, and it comes as a large group of migrants just across the border in Mexico are trying to figure out what to do next. This morning, migrants along the southwest border are again able to claim asylum after more than 3 years of being turned away. Over the last week, an average of just over 9,000 apprehended each day as Title 42 came to an end. That number expected to jump to as many as 14,000 a day in the coming weeks. A number of migrants are getting off this bus right now. They have been processed. They're getting off this federal bus and they are going in to this makeshift welcoming center that is here in Brownsville. We met Betty with her blue processing bag waiting for a bus to New York. She says the trip from Ecuador was terrifying. Help us, please, she says, asking U.S. politicians to give documents to migrants coming because they are coming to move ahead with their families. This comes just after Title 42 was lifted. The pandemic-era public health policy was used more than 2.8 million times to rapidly expel migrants. But DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas stressing that the policy change is not an invitation.
Our borders are not open. People who cross our border unlawfully and without a legal basis to remain will be promptly processed and removed.
While the federal government is predicting a post-Title 42 surge, it hasn't happened yet. We went to Mexico to find out why, walking to a massive migrant camp in Matamoros. Many people have been living here for months in squalid conditions. There are quite literally piles of garbage here. You can smell it. There's smoke in the air. They're burning, they're cooking, they're doing everything they can to try to sustain themselves here before trying to make it into the United States. The majority are choosing to stay at the makeshift camp as they try to get an interview to claim asylum using an app that's been plagued with problems. This woman from Honduras says for now, she has faith in the system. Because I believe in God, she tells me. But the Biden administration is now making it harder for migrants like her to make their asylum claims. Non-Mexican migrants must first be denied protection in a country they pass through on their way to the border. And migrants must secure an appointment at a port of entry using the Customs and Border Protection app. Failure to follow these rules likely to result in deportation and a 5-year ban on entering the country. The stricter requirements sparking legal action from the ACLU, who compared them to Trump-era policies they successfully sued to stop. The new rules still unsatisfactory to the president's critics.
This is an invasion, and they want the numbers to go up.
And not just Republicans.
The Biden administration had 2 years to prepare for this and did not do so.
But House Democrats stood united against a GOP border security bill passed on the day Title 42 expired. That bill opposed by the White House and dead on arrival in the Senate, leaving Congress still deadlocked over how to fix a decades-long dilemma with no end in sight.
It's going to be chaotic for a while.
With that in mind, border facilities are already crowded, and it could get worse. It comes after a federal judge in Florida ruled that migrants cannot be released without a formal notice to appear in court. The DOJ requested a temporary restraining order on that ruling, which the court denied. The DOJ is now expected to appeal to the 11th Circuit for an emergency stay. John.
Thank you, Will. Secretary Mayorkas joins us now. So, Mr. Secretary.
So, yeah, and Secretary Mayorkas, the Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, was on multiple programs, but since I'm not really covering the immigration issue, I didn't take any clips of him, but down in the video description under sources, you can see where I got all my clips, also where I got that TruthSocial post from Trump, and a little bit later I'm going to talk about progressive Christians and the being pro-marriage equality. There's a link to one of my 2008 videos down there. In the live comments, I put a link to my video back during the during the Obama administration, where I was speaking out for immigrants' rights. And you saw in that ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos piece that they did actually talk about the ACLU lawsuit against the Biden administration, comparing it to Trump-era asylum bans, where basically they preclude, if you make it to the border, if you didn't like ask for asylum before you got here somewhere and were denied, then you kind of have like a presumption. I mean, that's like the one difference. Alejandro Mayorkas was asked in one of the programs about this, and he said, well, we're not the same as the Trump administration because we only have a presumption that if you don't apply for asylum on your way and you enter illegally, that you'll be denied asylum. And you know, there's a higher, stricter standard for you to prove that you really need asylum. Otherwise, you get this 5-year ban from for applying for asylum. You just saw that in the news piece. They didn't make it quite that clear, but that is still pretty bad. And I think the ACLU is taking the right stand. I mean, like I said, they're not really covering why the people are coming here and like the bad things that are going on in the Northern Triangle countries, and you know, they're Haitian refugees. And I mean, accepting refugees is something that is like a humanitarian imperative. I mean, if you, I'm going to be talking about Christian evangelicals in a while, and also progressive Christians. And I mean, as I said earlier, I don't believe in faith-based religions, but one of the big messages of Christianity and of all the Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they're all supposed to be like welcoming of the stranger. Has anyone like read the Old Testament? I mean, half of it is like kill the people God says to kill, but the other half is like be really nice to people who come into your lands as strangers, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And yeah, that's the weird thing about the Bible. Like half of it is this like warlike, hate-filled stuff, and then the other half is like be really nice to people. And so that's why there's different kinds of Christians that I'm going to talk about when we get to that clip after the news summaries. But I'm like going off onto all the tangents today, and I want to get to the next news summary, which also focuses on the end of Title 42. Doesn't mention a lot of things, like certainly not the E Jean Carroll verdict you saw covered both by ABC and NBC. And this is, of course, the Fox News Sunday news summary. Not really news, not really journalism, as I point out every week. If you want to read about how Fox News was created to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party by Roger Ailes, you can read this book. Well, you can only see half of it this week for some. It's The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman. And I mean, that book is becoming more and more relevant all the time. But I want to get to the Fox News Sunday news summary that I will criticize after we watch Shannon Bream and then their reporter. Let me look at my notes here. Their reporter, Matt Finn, at the border, making you scared. I mean, it's not actually that different from what you saw on ABC. It's just like spun about 11 to the right. They like turned the Republican bias up to 11, as I will talk about after we watch the Fox News Sunday news summary from yesterday together over here.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. We begin this morning with developments in a pivotal week along the U.S.-Mexico border. This is the situation you have been seeing on TV the last few days. Thousands of migrants showing up hoping to be allowed to stay in this country. Many making the journey at this specific moment because the U.S. just ended a health restriction that had previously blocked their entry. Some in border enforcement and in policy. The Biden administration announcing sweeping new rules that bar most immigrants from entering for 5 years if they try to cross illegally. But the rules curbing asylum are already facing a major legal challenge from the ACLU. In a moment, Florida Republican Byron Donalds joins us to discuss his state's lawsuit over the planned release of some migrants without court dates or any plans to even track them. But first, we turn to Matt Finn, who's live in El Paso, with a look at what's really happening to migrants who show up at the border hoping to cross into the U.S. Matt?
Good morning, Shannon. Inside of this downtown shelter, there are 140 migrant women and children outside as the sun comes up here. These migrants are slowly waking up after sleeping on the street.
In downtown El Paso, outside of the overwhelmed Sacred Heart shelter, migrants are spread across 2 city blocks, sleeping on pavement and sheltering in a dirty alley before they find the means to move on to their next location in the U.S. And not far from that shelter is this point of entry at the border wall where the migrants arrive. They're bussed, processed, and potentially released. In Brownsville, Fox News cameras captured this video of migrant groups who were released, as they have been in this border town for well over a year now. The White House denies there are mass releases and is now promising to fight a federal judge's ruling that the government cannot release any migrant without issuing them a court date.
So let me just say on the ruling that you just laid out to me. So look, the way we see that, it's sabotage. It's pure and simple. That's how that reads to us.
And this morning, Shannon, the latest numbers from the city of El Paso, it reports that it has now released 4,297 migrants into the streets here just this past week alone. That is the highest number for any week this calendar year. Shannon.
Matt Finn reporting from El Paso, Texas. Matt, thank you very much. Joining us now, Florida Congressman Byron Donalds. Congressman.
And I will have a clip of Byron Donalds later being asked to respond to something Trump said about the debt ceiling, but certainly not the clip I showed you at the beginning of the show where he said, oh, I can flip-flop positions on the debt ceiling when I'm president and not president, and you should laugh and applaud when I tell you I'm lying to you. Or that I have no principles. But that's the final Newsmaker clip after we get through these news summaries. I don't know if you saw like the scare pictures there. I have way too much context for watching that Fox News Sunday news summary because I watch like Fox News every day for like more hours than I could, as many hours as I can stand, and that I guess varies from day to day, but and sometimes I watch them at like speeded up so that it takes less time to get through all of it, and sometimes I watch it and play video games at the same time, so that sort of makes me, if you multitask it, it's not quite as toxic. Speaking of, Trump toxicity, but my whole point is that they give all the same reporting that you saw, like from Matt Finn with the like drone footage of the border and the people sleeping on the streets because the system is overwhelmed with people who are seeking asylum, refugees who need help, and the answer is to like send more help. Congress should like pass a bill to send help, comprehensive immigration reform. I saw people talking about in the live comments a ways back, which almost happened like in 2013. There was like the group of 8 senators, and it was this whole bipartisan deal that included like Lindsey Graham and John McCain, who was still alive back then. He was still alive back then because I remember he like was still alive after Trump became president. So yeah, there was this big comprehensive immigration reform plan, and then the Republicans in the House just killed it because they want to have this issue. They want to scare people. Even though we have a labor shortage in the United States, we have a problem with too many retirees and not enough workers. You know what the solution to both those problems is? More immigration. More immigration, younger workers, like more that... the whole premise is wrong, and the coverage is wrong because they don't explain why people are actually coming to the border. And what was especially disingenuous about the Fox News coverage is they have been doing this countdown clock. That was the point I was trying to make when I talked about how much Fox News I watch. They've been doing this like end of Title 42 countdown clock, like, run for your lives. The Armageddon, the end of the world is coming, or it's the zombie apocalypse or whatever. And what actually happened is when Title 42 actually ended at 11:59 p.m. on last Thursday Eastern time, border crossings actually dropped. They dropped, and Alejandro Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary, was on multiple programs saying that they actually dropped 50% in the first few days because there'd been this surge before, and then it actually dropped on the day that the countdown clock had been counting down to, and Fox News doesn't really tell you that. They've been kind of talking about it since Mayorkas said it on multiple news programs, but you saw they were talking about like the people released into the local cities, not like the number of people crossing the border. And anyway, that was many reasons why the Fox News Sunday news summary was disingenuous and biased this week. I have a couple really brief news summaries left before I get to the newsmaker clips. The first one is CNN's State of the Union. Dana Bash was hosting this week. And she talks briefly about the debt ceiling as a looming crisis, as well as the crisis at the southern border, but not quite as badly as Fox News did it. I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of our Union is, wishing all of the moms out there a very happy Mother's Day. President Biden is making his general election pitch to voters, painting 2024 as another battle for the future of American democracy. But this month, two simmering problems pose big challenges to his reelection efforts: the potential for a catastrophic debt default and the crisis at the southern border. This weekend, the flow of migrants into the U.S. is lower than expected after the end of the COVID-era Title 42 border rule, but the administration is still faced with overcrowded facilities, legal challenges from the left and the right, and deadlock in Congress. House Republicans did pass a bill to bring back Trump-era policies like construction of the border wall and the authority to quickly expel migrants, but it's dead on arrival in the U.S. Senate, which leaves the country still without a real plan to fix a persistent problem that is only growing. So far in 2023, 1.3 million migrants have been apprehended along the southern border. Here with me now, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Thank you so much.
And like I said, if you want to see clips of Alejandro Mayorkas, including from CNN's State of the Union, go under sources in the video description. Like I said, all the news coverage of the end of Title 42 does not devote enough time to why people are at the border, just like they're here, it's a crisis, they're overwhelming our ports of entry or our customs and border protection staff or all that. That's especially what you see on Fox News, but it was one of the main focuses of both CNN's State of the Union news summary and also CBS News' Face the Nation, probably because of Alejandro Mayorkas. Well, no, this actually they had Nikki Haley on. Did they have Mayorkas on? I actually have all the transcripts here. So was Mayorkas on Face the Nation? No, they had Tony Gonzalez, Nikki Haley. Yeah, they did not have Mayorkas, but they had a independent. Well, you'll hear when I get to Margaret Brennan will tell you the mayors and the people from Texas they have on, and of course Nikki Haley to respond to the whole border crisis in the final news summary clip. I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Customs and Border Patrol says the first days of new border policies did not bring a spike in illegal crossings, but migration is still at historically high levels. Border Patrol is preparing for daily migrant arrivals to increase to between 12,000 to 14,000 per day. And they face major operational challenges with many detention facilities over capacity. Not surprisingly, the narratives we're hearing about the situation coming from the two political parties are at odds. We have 3 Texas guests standing by for firsthand updates: a Republican congressman, a Democratic mayor, and an independent mayor. But we want to begin with former South Carolina governor and presidential hopeful Nikki Haley.
So that's it for the news summaries. I actually like the NBC News one, as I thought that was the best one. The focus on immigration on ABC was mostly good, but like I criticized that clip after I showed it, before I showed it, and of course the Fox News one, and then I don't know, the 2 briefest ones from CNN and CBS. It's hard to criticize them just because they're, just a little over and a little under a minute, not much there. But I think the most coverage of the big issues, and especially the E Jean Carroll verdict, where a former U.S. president and the front runner for the Republican nomination, Donald Trump, is found liable for sexual abuse and defamation by a unanimous 9-person jury. That is a big story that should have been covered, and you saw covered in the first couple clips, especially NBC, but also by ABC. Fox News, they never even mentioned it until the panel discussion, and then it was Jillian Turner talking about, it was a criticism of the CNN town hall, where the criticism was that the CNN town hall brought up issues that Republicans didn't care about, and that was one of the issues Republicans don't care about. And I mean, that's a big problem. That's one of the big pieces of evidence that Donald Trump is the Trump toxicity is ruining Republicans. And this is kind of what Chuck Todd was talking about with Russell Moore, the editor of Christianity Today. And he especially took it out on Lindsey Graham. And he started off with a clip of Lindsey Graham from 1998. I think it's November 1998, during the Clinton impeachment, saying character matters, and, if you lie, it means you're, he talks about the whole morality thing. I don't know if this is the most damning clip of Lindsey Graham. I can think somehow my memories of the Clinton impeachment make me think there might be more damning clips of Lindsey Graham than this one. But the topic that Chuck Todd brings up with Russell Moore is an important one that I talked about earlier, about how, though I don't like the framing, because you'll see Chuck Todd talks about the loss of morality, the loss of, character counts, and I don't know if that's true. I think it's more like the pretense of morality I was talking about earlier, like the moral majority was never really that moral, and the identification of Christianity with conservatism I don't think is completely accurate. As I was talking about also earlier in the show, down in the video description, I put a link to this 2008 video, Is Gay Marriage a Two-Sided Issue? I put up a screenshot of an Episcopal priest, or the dean of the Episcopal Church. I think he's a priest there, talking in favor of marriage equality. And there are progressive Christians. So I think that Chuck Todd didn't make that clear enough in the coverage on Meet the Press, or the Meet the Press program didn't. But this is an important issue, and I don't know. I know a lot of my viewers aren't fans of Lindsey Graham. This is back when he was a member of Congress. This is young Lindsey Graham still being a partisan political tool, the partisan political tool we all know him to be. And then Chuck Todd's discussion of the loss of morality of the Republican Party, or at least the pretense, that I'll talk about a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Welcome back. Republicans once demanded morality in their politicians. Now it appears not so much. Just listen to what Lindsey Graham said on this program as House Republicans weighed whether to impeach Democratic President Bill Clinton 25 years ago for obstruction of justice and perjury.
It's one thing to go and commit a crime. It's another thing to flaunt it in front of the American people and never admit to your wrongdoing. If the president would have the character to come forward and admit to the wrongdoing that I think is obviously there, then maybe I would treat him differently. What I'm looking for is a president that has a character trait to lead the American people, that will put his interests secondary to the American people. I'm looking for somebody who's repentant, somebody who understands they made not just a mistake but violated the law. The law allows people to be treated differently if they'll come before the court and said, I'm sorry, I'm guilty. But somebody that plays the games to the bitter end, tries to have it both ways, dances on the head of the pin, in my opinion, has forfeited their right to lead this country.
So, does character matter in the Republican Party? Russell Moore has been one of the highest profile conservative evangelical voices speaking out against Donald Trump. From 2013 until his resignation in 2021, he was the president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention. Now, he's the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today. Dr. Moore, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. Good to meet you.
I want to repeat the last sentence there from Senator Graham. Again, 25 years ago, this was Lindsey Graham. Somebody that plays the games to the bitter end, tries to have it both ways, dances on the head of a pin, in my opinion, has forfeited their right to lead this country. I want to get your reaction to that. That was 1998. Where are we today?
Well, it was right in 1998, and it's right now, and that's part of what's so confusing to many of us who were taught in the 1990s that character matters and are now told by often the very same people that it doesn't. I mean, evangelical Christianity emphasizes that the internal affects the external. And the fact that a person's character in private has everything to do with his or her character in public. That has always been the case, and that's always been the issue here, is does character matter or does it not?
You know, even former Vice President Pence was kind of dismissive of the defamation verdict against with E Jean Carroll against the former president. You know, saying, well, I think this is something that the media cares more about. It was shocking. That was a shocking reaction for me coming from the former vice president. Was it to you?
I'm not sure what's going on in Vice President Pence's mind at this point. I know it was a shocking moment for me, even after everything that we've seen. And what's primarily shocking is the fact that here we are in a week where a former president of the United States is found liable for sexual abuse and sexual assault and defamation of a woman who survived such abuse and assault, and the country just yawns for the most part. That tells me that something has really, really badly gone awry in this country. And you add to it the demeanor and the content of President Trump's deposition. To simply shrug off and defend the Access Hollywood comments. In 2015, I said that President Trump had or Donald Trump at the time, had the attitude toward women of a Bronze Age warlord. In that deposition, he said, yeah, as a matter of fact, predated it back to millions of years ago, and said, unfortunately or fortunately, that's the way that it is. Well, think about the teenage girl in a church somewhere who's being abused by her youth pastor, wondering whether to come forward. And she hears not only that, but when the victim is ridiculed by a presidential candidate in front of a crowd, the response is laughter. That has devastating implications.
8 years ago, when Donald Trump first ran, there was a divide inside the evangelical community, and there was a lot of hand-wringing, and many came down on the side of, well, if the choice is between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump will appoint the judges that I like. You seem to indicate, after Donald Trump announced his re-election plans after the November 2022 midterms, that you didn't sense a divide anymore in the evangelical community, that politically they're all in. Do you still sense that?
Well, I think that's probably true with the politically activated, politically energized base. I don't think that's true of everyone. And that's one of the reasons why we see churches divided, we see families divided. I mean, one of the most dismaying aspects of the Trump years is the fact that Donald Trump is at the center of everything. Almost every congregation that I know is either divided or tense about these sorts of political controversies coming out of the Trump years. Almost every family that I know has people who don't speak to each other anymore about this personality and this figure. And I think there are a lot of people, including conservative evangelicals like me, who are looking at this and saying, are we really going to do this again? Haven't we seen this already? Do we really want to repeat it? And I suppose that will be the question for the rest of the year.
What would you like?
So yeah, I kind of pre-criticized that clip twice when I talked about some of the flaws in the framing, the lack of progressive Christians who aren't, and the lack of black evangelical Christians who are also not conservative. There's a lot of Christianity, a lot of people who are very egalitarian, very tolerant, very accepting, very much more like the ideals of Jesus to be, love your neighbor, love your enemy, turn the other cheek, sacrifice yourself on the cross or whatever. But I mean, there are a lot of messages of radical empathy and sacrifice and serving others that you can find in Christianity, that you can find in the Bible, that, pick between the good and the bad, like I was talking about before. And I did say I pre-criticized it, though, and I don't know if that's true that Trump's toxicity is splitting evangelical Christians. I think more like what Chuck Todd said, a lot of evangelical Christians are all in because I can't remember who's the biblical king or whatever, or biblical yeah, is it Nebuchadnezzar? I can't remember who the biblical king is who evangelical Christians think Trump is like totally immoral and totally like a bad guy, but accomplishes all the things that the devout people want to accomplish, appointing the judges, overturning Roe v. Wade, and I don't know, it's like the making a bargain with the devil. And and then of course my other criticism is the pretense at the beginning of that clip that I mentioned multiple times, that Republicans were moral before, or actually pretense is the word I used in terms of the morality. It was a pretense of morality, that now it's just naked grabs for power and hatred of my fellow man who doesn't correspond to all of my beliefs and all the things that are, my orthodoxy or whatever. But the one other comment there from Russell Moore I wanted to point out, this has to do with the collective yawn from a lot of America that Trump was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation in the E Jean Carroll case. And I give kudos to Chuck Todd and his guests for talking about that. None of the I'm going to show Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation in the next clip ask Nikki Haley, as a conservative woman, if she would talk about what it means for the front runner for the Republican Party to be found liable for sexual abuse and defamation in what was like a borderline rape case. And but none of the other Republicans, maybe because they're all men, I don't know why, but Mark Green and Mike McCall and Byron Donalds on the other three networks that I'm going to show, not asked about this at all. It is kind of disturbing, and I liked the way Russell Moore said that he had said back in 2015 that Trump has the morals of a Bronze Age warlord. That's kind of colorful language, so that's I want to hear more of that. And also the terrible effect on girls in the church, or women anywhere who have been victims of sexual abuse, when they see the crowd laughing, the crowd of supposedly moral Republican, probably mostly Christians, laughing when Trump demeans E Jean Carroll, and as someone who has convinced a jury that she was sexually abused by Donald Trump. I mean, could there be a better example of the toxicity of Donald Trump ruining Republicans? That is the title of my video. I don't know. You can let me know what you think. And now I'm going to show you 4 Republicans trying to respond to the toxicity of Donald Trump. First, Nikki Haley, who is using the fact that, he's been found liable, but she's using the fact that there's still the possibility of appeal as like a way for her not to give judgment. And Margaret Brennan, I give her credit for asking this question, but she doesn't really follow up at the end after Nikki Haley says, there's been a judgment of a jury. She does follow up, a jury found, but then there's a judgment of a jury and there's an appeal, and the American people will just have to make their judgment based on, or decide what they think based on that. Well, what do you think, Nikki Haley? That's the one question that should have been asked at the end of the clip. I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
I want to ask you, as a conservative woman, do you think it undermines your party if the Republican frontrunner is someone who was just found liable, legally liable, for sexually abusing a woman?
I have always said that anyone that feels like they have been sexually assaulted in any way should come forward and have their voice heard. I also think anyone that's been accused should be able to defend themselves. I was not on the jury. I am not the judge. I think that both of them had their voices heard. There has been a verdict and there's been an appeal.
President Trump was
that's for
offered
Trump to defend, and that's Trump to decide that.
He gave a deposition, but he didn't go in to defend himself, and it was a jury that came to this conclusion. Are you drawing into question the legal findings?
No, I said there's a verdict, and I think there's been an appeal, and I think it stands where it stands, and I think the American people need to make a decision based on that.
All right. Nikki Haley, thank you for coming.
So, sorry there. Yeah, I pretty much pre-criticized that clip because that was the end. Maybe Margaret Brennan ran out of time, but they have like extended interviews on the website sometimes, so they should keep going. But one important follow-up question: well, the American people should decide. Well, what do you decide, Nikki Haley, based on the jury verdict and Trump's probably really weak appeal? You're running against him. Well, and this isn't the only sexual assault accusation against Donald Trump. In fact, 2 other possible victims testified in the E Jean Carroll trial, and no follow-up on that, but what can you do about that? Anyway, that is my criticism of Margaret Brennan, although she did ask a couple good follow-up questions there, and she's the only one of the anchors who asked a Republican, other than, I guess, Russell Moore. I don't even know if he is a Republican, the editor of Christianity Today, in that Meet the Press clip I already showed. But here is Representative Mark Green over on CNN's State of the Union, where Dana Bash asks about something else that's really unchristian, toxic Trump policy that is ruining Republicans because it's really unpopular with the American people. And if you don't remember how bad it all was, well, read this book right here, Separated. This is by MSNBC reporter Jacob Soboroff. It's about the Trump era family separation policy that there were children who were never reunited with their parents. Thousands and thousands of children ripped away from their parents where the U.S. government didn't even keep the records to put them back together. Some of them were farmed out and adopted by some of those white evangelical Christians I was talking about earlier. They left it up to the non-governmental organizations, including the ACLU, to try to figure out how to reunite them with their parents. It was a huge travesty, and Trump actually doubled down on the policy at his CNN town hall, and Mark Green is asked about that, and he disagrees with the policy, but this is another example of how Trump toxicity is ruining Republicans, because he can't say Trump is wrong. He disagrees with the policy. He says, Republicans didn't include that policy in this latest bogus bill we passed that will never become law. But he won't say Trump is wrong. And the brief clip I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
The issue first, then the immigration piece.
So one disincentive that former President Donald Trump didn't rule out is using the child separation policy again if he's reelected. Listen to what he said.
But when you have that policy, people don't come. If the family hears that they're going to be separated, they love their family. They don't come.
Should that policy come back?
So that's why in this bill, we were very clear families should not be separated. If you look at House H.R. 2, it's very clear we're not separating families.
So you disagree with the former
But detention
president?
does serve as a deterrence. So I don't think we should separate families, and that's why we put it in this bill.
You floated the possibility that House Republicans should impeach Secretary Mayorkas. The Constitution says impeachment is supposed.
So I just kept that playing a little bit so you can see Dana Bash did not follow up on that, like let him get away with, I mean, she followed up once, but didn't like make him say, well, but what about this book Separated? What about all the families like destroyed by the Trump administration? Was that wrong? Are you willing to go back to that? I think that deserves an extra follow-up, but you can let me know what you think in the comment section. And this next clip is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, another Republican who wasn't asked about the sexual abuse and defamation verdict against Trump, which also Dana Bash did not ask Mark Green about. But this is another like big Republican supposed policy that Trump has destroyed, like being anti-communist, anti-Soviet, and then anti-Russian and pro-NATO. Trump did a lot to weaken NATO. At the town hall, he wouldn't call Vladimir Putin a war criminal. He wouldn't say Ukraine should win the war against Putin. And I mean, I'm not a neocon or pro-military or even pro-war. I did some coverage of what's going on with Ukraine, and I do think Ukraine was invaded by a aggressive foreign power, and there was some justification to support the Ukrainian people in their fight against Russian expansionism. I don't buy. I talked early on in the conflict about not buying all the propaganda necessarily. I remember like in the invasion of Kuwait, the like babies are being dumped out of incubators, and so you have to have a little bit of a critical eye towards what both the government of Ukraine and the government of the United States put out in terms of information about the war. And there was that whole like 21-year-old Massachusetts National Guard dude who like leaked stuff that he had access to as an IT guy in defense intelligence or whatever, that showed that some of the stuff we've been hearing about Ukraine isn't entirely accurate. Some people called it like a version of the Pentagon Papers for the Ukraine conflict, and I wouldn't go that far, but I would just say like never believe what governments say during a war without, take it all with a grain of salt, because there's definitely going to be pro-military spin and all of that. But all of that being said, the Republican Party has, is supposed to be like the strong on defense, like peace through strength party all the way back to Reagan, and well, I mean, even long, but all the way back to Nixon and the anti-communist McCarthy era. Anyway, all of that. And Trump like kind of destroyed that by not even saying Ukraine should win this war. And here is Mike McCall, one of those pro-defense Republicans, trying to justify that in my penultimate newsmaker clip of Republicans being ruined by Trump toxicity over in this clip.
Situation. Okay, you've been a staunch ally of Ukraine in fending off the Russian aggression. I want to play something that Donald Trump had to say at his town hall meeting this morning about it. I mean, this week.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I don't think in terms of winning and losing. I think in terms of getting it settled so we stop killing all these people.
Can you say if you want Ukraine or Russia to win this war?
I want everybody to stop dying.
I mean, what do you say to that? I mean, he's your Republican frontrunner right now.
Well, and I think Donald Trump...
And he can't say whether or not he wants Ukraine to win against Russian aggression.
I think he always thinks in terms of winning and losing. I will say this. I think what he is thinking is that this counteroffensive, which is happening soon, will be so successful that we can have a ceasefire and maybe get to a negotiating phase. Do I want Ukraine to win? Of course. That's why I wanted the administration to put everything they had into this conflict so they could win. And thank God the Brits stepped it up when this administration went put the longer-range artillery to Crimea. Our administration has put Crimea as a red line, and a victory in Ukraine is also a victory against the Chinese Communist Party in Taiwan. I just came back from the region. Every Asian leader told me what happens in Ukraine has a direct impact on Taiwan.
Okay, two quick questions before we go. One, Secretary Blinken, you said you would hold him in contempt.
And you can see there, Jon Karl followed up on a different issue. Did not ask Mike McCall, how do you know what Trump is thinking? Did you ask Trump what he's thinking? And how come you have this much more nuanced pro-Ukraine thought process that is embedded in something Trump said that where he refused to endorse that thought process specifically? So not good follow-up there from Jon Karl. Also, as I think I said before, no question of that Republican about the historic verdict this week where Trump was found liable of sexual abuse and defamation of E Jean Carroll. That's never happened before. Didn't come up in that interview, and didn't come up, of course, in the Fox News Sunday interview of Byron Donalds, where Shannon Bream did ask about defaulting on the debt ceiling, what Trump said about defaulting on the debt ceiling, but not the part where he said, oh, I can say whatever I want. I can contradict myself when I'm president and not president because I have no principles. Didn't play that clip, but I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the final Newsmaker clip for the program today together over here.
Consequences on this issue of default, which we're told is coming potentially within days if there's not a deal. Former President Trump, whom you've endorsed, had this to say on Wednesday night.
I say to the Republicans out there, congressmen, senators, if they don't give you massive cuts, you're going to have to do a default.
The current president says this about default. It would erase millions of jobs, trigger a recession, hit retirement accounts, and increase borrowing costs. It's not an option. So is it an option or not? Which president do you agree with?
Well, look, I will tell you right now, President Trump is a master negotiator. I don't know what Joe Biden's ever done to negotiate anything of substance. Let's be very clear, Shannon. You're going to have to curtail spending. Joe Biden wants to spend $7 trillion. That's his budget. We only take in about $4.2 to $4.5 trillion in taxes. So he wants to massively spend money we don't have. He wants to massively borrow and think there are no consequences. And like I just said, inflation is the consequence for every American under Joe Biden's reckless policy. So the House position is very clear. Let's go to pre-COVID spending levels. Everybody understands why we had to ratchet up spending to respond to the pandemic. We all get that. But the pandemic is now over. It's time to bring spending levels back to pre-COVID, and then we can talk about raising the debt ceiling. And frankly, not even talk about it. Republicans have passed that plan. If Joe Biden brings nothing to the table, if all he does is sit there with his hands in his pockets and not understanding what he has done and a way to actually negotiate, then he is the one leading our nation into default. And it's a very sad thing to see. Last thing on this, there's a proposal that has been floating around Congress about payment prioritization. What Treasury can do is pay interest and principal on our debt first. That would actually stave off all this concern of this default. And then we can pay Social Security, Medicare, pay for our military, and then go down the line. If Democrats want to continue to run so many of the agencies that they've basically put a bunch of their crazy policies into, then they have to find a way to bring spending down with Republicans so we can raise the nation's debt ceiling going forward.
I'll ask Congressman Condon about that coming up. But before we let you go, because you're on House oversight and we're part of the rollout of these bank documents that show various payments to different Biden family members from foreign accounts.
And so, of course, they end the interview talking about Hunter Biden and the Biden family, crime family, even though the Republican House member press conference about all those bank documents was such a big dud, they didn't even believe it on Fox and Friends. I almost used that as my political comedy clip. But the political comedy clip I showed you was actually the context that shows the Fox News bias in that last newsmaker clip that I just showed, where Shannon Bream showed Byron Donalds a clip of Trump saying, Republicans should default. And then she said, well, Trump says we should default. Biden says we shouldn't default. Which president do you agree with? But if Fox News was honest, they would have shown the continuation of that clip I showed, where it was, which president do you agree with, Donald Trump now or Donald Trump when he was president? Because he totally flip-flopped and laughed about it. Didn't show that on Fox News. But before I finish the program, I'll just remind you of the full context of the clip that Fox News didn't show over here.
If they don't give you massive cuts, you're going to have to do a default. And I don't believe they're going to do a default, because I think the Democrats will absolutely cave, because you don't want to have that happen. But it's better than what we're doing right now, because we're spending money like drunken sailors.
So just to be clear, Mr. President, you think the U.S. should default if the White House does not agree to the spending cuts Republicans are demanding?
Well, you might as well do it now, because you'll do it later, because we have to save this country. Our country is dying. Our country is being destroyed by stupid people, by very stupid people.
You once said that using the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge just could not happen. You said that when you were in the Oval Office.
That's when I was president.
So why is it different now that you're out of office?
Because now I'm not president.
So there you see, that clip was not used to question Byron Donalds on Fox News, even though that's the full context of the clip that they didn't show. So Fox News bias in their video editing, Fox News bias in general, and we've come first circle, first clip to last clip, and back around to the first clip, and that's all the clips I picked out for you. I hope you appreciate the time and effort I put into making this Monday media mix-up. It takes me like 8 to 10 hours over Sunday and Monday to do. If you appreciate what I'm doing, you can give me supportive comments for the live viewers. I saw some along the way already, and recorded show viewers. I also appreciate you and your supportive comments. Right under the video, I put a couple ways you can support the program financially if that is something you want to do. In any case, whatever capitalistic financial rewards I get from this program, I will keep doing it every Monday all the way through the 2024 political season, which, as I pointed out, goes at least through January 6, 2025, because that apparently is part of our presidential election process now. I guess we'll see what happens. Hopefully, Trump toxicity will continue ruining Republicans and the Republican Party and the chance of a Republican being elected in the 2024 elections. I guess we'll all stay tuned and see, and stay tuned to my channel every Monday, sometime in the mid to late afternoon or evening California time, for my Monday media mix-up. And until next Monday, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.